All right, let's take a look at, we have one more section after this on 2-3. So there's actually like 4 different ones, I think. At least I made it into 4. It'd be terrible if I taught a whole lesson in one period, wouldn't it? I'd have to fly through it. I don't know if I could even talk that fast. Because they are long lessons. But it is college algebra, right? Not high school algebra. So I guess they design it like that. All right, so let's do this. Let's draw a little graph here. I want to demonstrate how we get to this slope-intercept form. This is something a lot of teachers don't do. They usually just tell you. Remember we talked about this the other day, y equals mx plus b? That's what we're going to do right now, okay? But most of the time a teacher shows you y equals mx plus b, they just throw it out there. They just said, here it is. This is what the m is, this is what the b is, this is how you use it. And that's good, I guess. Because you learn how to use it. But what we're going to do is we are going to come up with why is it y equals mx plus b. All right, we did that with the point slope form, and we're going to do it with the slope intercept form. So let's go back to that point slope form. Remember what the point slope form equation is? Y minus y1 equals m. So you got to memorize this. X minus x1. Good. All right. So some people were listening. That's good. And the m represents the what? Slope, and the x1 and the y1 represent a point on the line or a specific point that they give you. All right. Actually, this x by itself and this y by itself actually could represent any point on the line, but we're not going to talk about that. This x and this y just stays x and y. Remember, we talked about that yesterday? So what we are going to do is we are going to draw a line that has a y-intercept. We've talked about y-intercepts before. You could put it anywhere on the y-axis. I'm just going to put it right there. Okay? And let's see. Let's just draw a line that goes through like that. And let's talk about a couple things here. All right, so here's a line, goes through the y-axis, so it has a y-intercept, so that point right there. Now, I didn't put any numbers on there, right? I didn't put any grids or anything where you can count how far or anything like that. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to say that we go up. So like if we went over, sometimes they say if you go over a certain distance horizontally, we'd call that a distance, x equals, remember that with the horizontal thing? We said x equals a, then we said y equals b. Remember that? So we're going to call this b, point B, all right? Or it's really not point B. It's how far you go up on the y-axis, all right? That's the distance. It could be a 3, could be a 5, could be 100, all right? Whatever it is, all right? That's how far we go up here. So what would the point be? I see a lot of tops of heads. I want to see your eyeballs. Okay, so what would the point actually be? This is the distance. From here to here is length b. So what would this ordered pair be right here at this point? Matt, I think you know. We went up b. So if this was a 5, what would that point be? It would be 0, 5. It's not 5, it's b, right? So it's 0 what? B. You got that? Okay, that's pretty important. Because again, what are we trying to do? We're trying to develop this slope-intercept form. So over here on this, okay, we don't really know the slope because we don't really know any numbers or anything. So we're just going to keep this m for slope. Watch your step. And right here, the x1 and the y1 would be right here, wouldn't it? Remember the x1 and the y1 is the point that they give you, and this is the only point that we know right here. Did everybody give me a late pass that came in? I didn't notice. All right. So what are we trying to do? We're trying to put this stuff in here. You'll see how it works out. So we're going to write this equation. This is point slope form. It's not slope intercept form, but we're going to turn a point slope form into a slope intercept form. All right. So we're going to put y minus what? According to this information right here. What's my y1? It's b. Everybody see that? It's my x1, that's my y1. Equals. I don't know what the slope is. I can't really figure it out because I don't know any real numbers here. So I'm just going to write the letter m. And then let's write the other stuff. The x just stays x minus the x1. What's the x1 here? 0. What we're going to do is we're going to simplify this. We took it from the point slope form, And we are going to turn it into the slope-intercept form. It's like the third time I said that today. So let's do it. Y minus b equals, what's x minus 0? It's just x, right? So it's m times x. Everybody good with that? Let's get y by itself. Really simple. What do? Get y by itself plus b. Y equals, let's stick that on the end over here. So m, oh, does it look familiar to you? Yeah, it does, doesn't it? See what we just did? Okay, we took a line, a general line, all right, because we don't know exactly where it went through the y-axis, but we do have a line that crosses the y-axis, has a y-intercept, so we put it into the point-slope form, and we turned it into y equals mx plus b. Something that just rolls off the tip of your tongue, doesn't it? In math, y equals mx plus b, you say it all the time, you heard your teacher say it all the time, you've used this a lot. It's not the first time you've ever seen this, all right? So there you go. That's the formula. So let's do this. Let's turn this into red. I've already asked this question before, but what is the m on this? That is the what? That is the slope. Now here's the thing that's a little bit new. All right, it's supposed to be an arrow right there. What is the b? It's where it crosses the what? The y-axis, so it's the y-intercept. I'll write out the whole word, intercept. All right, so that's the y-intercept, and that's the slope. And that's an equation you're going to use a lot. Like I said, it rolls off the tip of your tongue because you're used to it. You've had it in Algebra 1, you had it in geometry, and you had it in Algebra 2. And now you got it again in college algebra. So when you actually go to college and you take a math class, I can almost guarantee that you're going to need to know what the slope-intercept form is. All right, let's just stick an equation. Let's go easier color to read. Let's go to blue. So y equals, let's see what numbers I got, negative 2x plus 7. Now we just described this, but let's do it again with some real numbers here instead of just a bunch of letters. All right, so here's the slope-intercept form because you have a slope and you have an intercept. So let's show you, let's say which ones are which. So the slope, m, what is the slope on this? If I ask you the slope of this equation, what would you tell me? It's negative 2. And what is the y-intercept? Let's write it like this. What is the y, if I could write here, and I'll just put int, is that all right with you? The y-intercept would be what? Everybody look at this. It's 7, it's positive 7, okay? Everybody with me? Or if I wanted to put b, right, that's the b, all right? So all we did right there is just identify which one's the slope, which one's the y-intercept, which is very important because if you put it in slope-intercept form, it's now very easy to graph, okay? If you know where the y-intercept is, you go on the y-axis, bam, you put a point right there on the y-axis. The slope, how would I graph a slope? I'd start at the y-axis, and what do? I rise and I run. Agree? All right. We're not going to graph this one, but we will graph the next one. All right, so this is example 8. And the question's pretty easy. It says find the slope and the y-intercept. And it says to graph it as well. So find the slope and the y-intercept and a lot of ands, graph. Okay, so we're finding the slope, the y-intercept, and we're going to graph the thing. So here's our formula, or not formula, equation. Changed it up a little bit, didn't I? Well, I didn't, the book did, but. So it's not y equals mx plus b, is it? If it was y equals mx plus b, just like on that last one right here, I could just easily not do any math, and I can say, oh, that's the slope, that's the y-intercept, bang, I'm done. But on this one, it's not y equals mx plus b. Can I just look at one of these and say, oh, that must be the b, that must be the y-intercept because it's out there by itself? Nope, not necessarily, all right? So you can't just look at one of these things. This is right next to the x. Does that mean the y-intercept is 2? No, because it's not in the form y equals mx plus b. So, wild guess. What do you think we're going to do with this right here? Say it. Yeah, but in general, not specifically. We're going to solve for y. Very good. We're going to solve for y, all right, because we want it y equals, and then the rest, right? mx plus b. Everybody got that? By the way, we're going to talk about this in a minute. Well, maybe a couple minutes. This is a certain form. This is called the general form of the equation of a line. Okay, we'll talk about that in a minute, but for right now, we'll just leave it at that. So let's solve for y. Let's do that. Let's get y by itself. So I want to get y by itself. So first thing I'm going to do is get rid of the 2x. I'm going to do this quickly because this is basic algebra that you should know how to do. I'm going to put this over here. Now, I could put 8 minus 2x, but remember what form I want it in. I want it y equals mx, then plus b. So I want the x to go first. You okay with that? So I'm going to slide the 2x over here. I'm going to put it out in front. I subtract a 2x to get rid of it. So I put a minus 2x here. The 8 just stays there. I'm going to put the plus 8 on the end. Now it's starting to look like a little bit closer to y equals mx plus b. One more step, divide by 4, divide this by 4, divide this by 4, and now we finally have y by itself. Let's simplify this. What's negative 2/4? That's negative 1/2 x plus 8 over 4 is 2. So that's not our answer because what do they ask you to do? They ask you to find the slope. They ask you to find the y-intercept. Now we can just look at it, just like we did that other little equation. Okay, now we can just look at it and say what the slope and the y-intercept is. All right, so let's go ahead and identify them. So the slope, that's the first part of our question, is negative 1/2. And then the y-intercept, I'll just put b for y-intercept, is what? 2. Pretty easy, isn't it? Yeah, I think so. Let's push this over here. Just so I can fit the graph in. And let's go to white for the graph. All right, so let's do a little graph deal. Right there, right there. Okay, watch how easy it is. Let's use this pink to do the graph. Well, it didn't grab it. Where is it? There it goes. All right, so how do we graph? If you have slope-intercept form, how do we graph it? First of all, I look for the y-intercept. That's the easiest thing to do. What's the y-intercept? We already identified it. It's 2, so we come up 1, 2, and we put a dot. That's where it crosses the y-axis. Now, which way is it going to slant? Well, this is going to tell you which way it's going to slant. It's the slope, all right? So let's put a couple more in here. All right, so this is what you would do on your paper. Okay, put one right there at 2, and then the slope is negative 1/2. Remember, negative 1/2, you could do this. You could rise negative 1 and run 2. Or you could do what? Rise positive 1 and run what? Negative 2. And aren't both of these negative 1/2? Yeah. So we're here. So I could go down and to the right 2, or I could go up 1 and to the left 2. It should line up. Let's do them both just for fun, okay? So let's go down 1, like we're doing this first one right here. So we're going to go down 1 and to the right 2. So you should put a dot right there. Now, if I connect those, that should be our line. But I'm going to put a third one in there just to make sure I did this right. So I could do what? I could go up 1 and to the left 2. So let's try that. Again, from the y-intercept. Don't start at the origin. For some reason, I've seen kids do that. Start at your y-intercept, and I'm going to go up 1 and to the left 2. That would be right there. Do they look like they line up? Yep, they do. And see if I can, I'm going to start here. And then I'm going to extend this one. There we go, like that. Sure enough, that's pretty close. If I would use that grid thing like I used the other day, it would have been perfect, okay? But you could see that, you know, I didn't put the lines probably, you know, exactly the same distance and all that. But that's pretty close, though. That's good. All right, so there it is, and there it is right there. And there's your graph. So you took something in general form and turned it into slope-intercept form, and you're able to find the slope, find the intercept, and graph it. All right, let's do one more example. Remember I talked about that general form right there? This is where they're going to talk about it right now. So we already saw what the general form was. Let's write it down. So it would be this. They use a capital A and a capital B, and a capital C. All right? And again, this is the general form of an equation of a line. Now, the general form is really not the what's the word I want to use? It's not the most practical form, okay? The point slope form that we did first, right? We did yesterday. That's very practical because if they give you a point, they give you a slope, you should be able to graph it. You should be able to figure out what it looks like. The slope-intercept form is very practical. I know where the intercept is, the y-intercept is. I know how to find the slope, and we're good. The general form is not quite as practical. You can still use it, but it's not quite as practical. But what they're going to do is they're going to ask you to graph something that's in this form, but they're going to ask you to graph it with the x and y intercepts, which is not a new concept. You actually had to do that on the quiz, didn't you? Okay, you had to find the x. Remember, it was like number what? 2 and 3. Had to find the x and y intercept, and then number 4, you had to graph it. Yeah. So that's basically what you're going to do here. It's really not anything different than we've already done. So let's actually. Let's not do the graph yet. Sorry about that. I'll keep this in green. What it's going to say is this. Let's change color. So it's going to say graph the equation. I'll just write the equation. 2x plus 4y equals 8. Does that look familiar? 2x plus 4y equals 8? Should. It's right there, isn't it? Okay, basically what they're trying to do is show you 2 ways to graph it, okay? So this is one way to graph it, is to solve for y and then do the intercept and the slope, okay? That's one way to graph it. This is another way to graph it, especially if it's in the general form. You can decide, well, it depends on what the question on the quiz says. If it says turn it into slope-intercept form, you have to do it that way. But if it just says graph this and nothing else, you can choose which way you want to do this. All right, it's up to you. All right, if all they say is graph. So, well, actually, on this one, it doesn't just say graph. By the way, this is example 9. Okay, it doesn't just say graph. It says graph by finding its intercepts. Let's write that down. So you have to read the instructions. Don't just look at it and say, oh, it says to graph this. But there's more to it. By finding its intercepts. All right, so sloppy on this graphics tablet thing. I used to have a bigger one, and my hand could fit on it now. Anyway, that's my problem. All right, by finding its intercepts. So you had to do this on the quiz. Let's do it now. So find the x-intercept. How do we find the x-intercept? We do what? We set what? Do you remember? Y equal to 0. Okay, we did that before. Did it on homeworks. All that kind of stuff. So we set y equal to 0. So let's do this. So it's going to be 2x plus 4 times, what is the y? 0 equals 8. And now what are we going to solve for? The only thing we can solve for is x. So this is going to be 2x plus what? 0. So I'm not going to even put anything there. Equals what? 8. Divide by 2. X is what? How do we write an intercept? We always write it as an ordered pair. Don't just write x equals 4. Write it as an ordered pair. So the x is 4 and the y is 0. So that's one point that we can graph on our graph, okay? We can put that point 40 there. But you got to have more than just one point, right? You either got to have a slope or another point. Well, let's find another point. And let's find the y-intercept. So the x-intercept, we set y equal to 0. To find the y-intercept, we set x equal to 0. Remember all that? Hope so. And now let's put it into that equation. So x is 0 this time. So 2 times x, or 2 times 0, plus 4y equals 8. Now let's solve for y. 2 times 0 is 0. So it's 4y equals 8. Divide by 4, y equals 2. But that's not our y-intercept. How do we write our y-intercept? X is 0, y is 2. So now, and you may think, you know what, Mr. Hamrick, I liked solving for y better. That was a lot easier. And you might be right. Okay, but of course, look, I showed just about every little step here. You might have been able to do that in your head a lot quicker than what I just did right there. So maybe you like this way better. Again, of course, oops, why am I going sideways? There we go. So now let's graph this thing. Let's make the graph white. All right, so we got it here, we got it here. And so now all we have to do is plot those 2 points, right? 4, 0. 1, 2, 3, 4. Boom, right there. 0, 2. 1, 2. Put a point right there, and then you're good to go. You just connect them. And there's your graph. And put a little arrow right there. That's supposed to be, it looks ugly. Let's make it better. Boom, boom. There we go. And there's your graph. Simple. And doesn't that look exactly, did we graph the other one? We did, didn't we? Yeah. Doesn't that pink graph right there look exactly like the yellow graph right there? Yeah, it should. All right, because it's the same equation, right? So it should have the same graph. But 2 different ways. Which way did you like better? Hands up. Did you like the solving for y and putting it in the slope-intercept? Who likes solving for y better? I got 1, 2, 3, 4. That's it? 5 maybe? Okay, who liked doing the intercept method better? Finding the intercepts, putting 0 in? Some people aren't voting. It looks like the intercepts won by a slim margin. Again, on a quiz or a test, how do you know which way to graph it? If I tell you, right? If I tell you to graph it a certain way, then you have to do it that way. If all I do is just say graph this equation, you can choose whatever way you want to graph it. You with me on that? All right. Questions? Man, that was a pretty easy lesson, wasn't it? And pretty quick. We got one more lesson to do on 2-3. We'll do that, I guess, on Monday. Do we have school on Monday, I guess? Seems like we have off all the time, but I don't think we have a day off, do we, until Easter break? I think you guys might have a professional development day off, but I don't. And I think that's it. I don't think we have any more vacation, do we, until... That's depressing, isn't it? This is like the biggest stretch, I think, of the year from now until... Yeah, when's your senior trip? Oh, it's during Easter break? Oh, wow, okay. So here's your homework. You should know already because I gave you a paper on it. And it's in RenWeb as well. So 186. So now get your homework out. We got a few minutes here. Literally a few. 3 or 4. 15. Now watch this. It's 70, so what does that mean? Sorry about that, but it's really not that many. Okay? So you're going to do them all. All right, everybody good?